See how nice it is to be in a well-lit, well-rounded, well-sounded studio? For my wrestling fans out there, the title of the show today is for you. A good afternoon, everybody. This is Friday, a football Friday, September 22nd,
Justin already coming in, man.
And a $10 contribution from Justin. He says, happy Friday. Thanks for the content, Corey and Chris. Well, Justin, a happy Friday to you. And we can't do this content without you. And those that are tuning in, whether it's live from 3 to 3:30 Eastern or in podcast form where those are found every Monday through Friday. The Las Vegas Raiders, Chris, are on the horizon. And, of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers coming off of a win, a defensive-minded, if you will, win against the Cleveland Browns. And going into this game, obviously there's a lot to go into. There's a lot to digest. And by the end of the show, we will give our picks to this game. Happy Friday already, Randy. Yes. Short week. This is what happens. We're going. It's a full go mode.
It's awesome. Love it. William, need 10 more likes. Need a lot more likes. We appreciate it, man.
Leave a like. Please subscribe. Please share. That helps a long way, and that goes a long way. Robert asks where the baseball caps are coming. The Southside Beat baseball caps. DK is the one to address on that. I don't make that call. I will certainly put a request in. So let's talk about the matchup, Chris. And Swan brings the topic right to the table, and we're going to dive into as much as we possibly can about Steelers versus Raiders, of course, coming up Sunday Night Football this weekend. And Swan269, he asks, do you think the Raiders' defense is a good defense to turn things around for the Steelers? And that's a really good point if you want to look at the Steelers from an offensive perspective. And we could sit here and talk all we want about Matt Canada and about his play calling and about how he designs and runs this offense. But the brass tacks is there's also a defense on the other side that needs to be conquered. And the facts of the matter is this Raiders defense. Oh, do we have a breaking news? We have a breaking news on a practice report. So let's get into this.
Here we go.
Let's get into this. Gunnar Olszewski is out for Sunday. Did not practice all week. Still in the concussion protocol. So Gunnar Olszewski is out. Everybody else that was on the injury report practiced in full on Friday. This, of course, coming straight from the Steelers. So Devontae Casey, 2 practice days in a row in full with his calf injury. Micah Fitzpatrick back to full. That's the big one. And he said he's going to play, obviously, with his chest injury. Yeah. Marcus Golden, full practice with his knee injury. He also spoke publicly today about that he was going to play. Darnell Washington, who confirmed to me that he was going to play on Sunday, practiced in full. Larry Ogunjobi, who recorded 2 DNPs, did not plays on Wednesday and Thursday, practiced in full today with his foot injury. So we will have that detail on the feed. This is a little bit earlier than I anticipated, certainly, for a West Coast for the injury report to drop. So there's your breaking news. I'm going to add this into the feed while Chris talks about it. Again, Gunnar Olszewski out on Sunday. Everybody else back to full practice. Of course, Isaac Seumalo and Patrick Peterson took a vet day of rest on Wednesday. So they practiced in full 2 days in a row. So there's your injury report, Chris. No Gunnar Olszewski. That's the only one. But good to see that Micah Fitzpatrick and you're going to see on DKPittsburghSports.com later, Darnell Washington are back to practice.
And also coming on DK Pittsburgh Sports later, I'm going to have a breakdown. I don't know if anybody got to read my breakdown on the Steelers running game and what the heck's happened to it. But I'm also going to be doing a breakdown on the Raiders. Maybe not quite as deep as like we've seen, like as I've gone into Matt Canada or the Steelers running game, but just to give you a deeper look at what the Raiders are bringing to the table and ways that the Steelers can possibly exploit that. One way, just to kind of give a little bit of a teaser there, is this Raiders defense can be run on. The Bills did it last week, and I don't think the Bills are considered to be like a running juggernaut. I don't think, they kind of compare with the Browns or the Ravens or the Giants. Like, think about teams last year that ran the ball really, really well. Mm-hmm. Mike, I can read the sarcasm. We're saying we're screwed, no Gunner. But one thing that I really wanted to point out was the way that the Bills ran on the Raiders. And unfortunately, the Steelers don't run the ball the same way the Bills do, or at least the way the Bills did against the Raiders. the Steelers are primarily a zone running team. That doesn't mean that they don't do any gap or man. It's just that means that they typically run more zone concepts, specifically outside zone. While the Bills did primarily gap and man scheme against the Raiders. And here are the splits from last week. James Cook, their starting running back, had 14 carries for 113 yards. That's an average of over 8 yards a carry. And when they ran man and gap schemes, and ran only 3 carries for 10 yards against zone. Now that's, a little over 3 yards a carry. And obviously you have a major discrepancy. Like they did way more gap than they did zone. But I just think it just goes to show you with the way the Raiders defense lined up. Now, granted, the Bills typically line up a little bit more spread than the Steelers do, but if you want a way to exploit the Raiders defense, the Bills gave you film to do it. Pretty much that's what I'm trying to say. And the Steelers do run some gap schemes. They do run duo. I know that. I have yet to meet an offensive lineman that doesn't like running duo. So I don't. I can talk about Matt Canada and what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing, but that's just one way that they could possibly exploit the Raiders. Here's a Chris, or here's a Corey, or here's a Corey, here's a Chris. Let me say it right. Here's a question for Corey and Chris, for both of us, from Randy. Are either one of you going to Vegas? And the answer is no. DK is going to be covering that game solo. I'm going to be helping him out as much as I can from afar, doing a lot of behind the scenes stuff so that he knocks out his 2 columns. So that's not a problem. But I will be going. I just got word I will be going to Houston.
There you go. I'm doing the pit game.
Not much of a shocker for Houston because it's 4 hours down the highway, but I will be in Houston. So
I will be doing the pit game on Saturday. Too much dismay to some, too much joy to some. It depends on what we see on Saturday. And what you saw right there was Chris doing enough stalling so I could add the practice report into our feed on DKPittsburghSports.com.
Let's talk about some stuff. Trevor asked Corey, Chris and Corey, is our run game so bad because of bad scheme or poor execution or everything in between? I would say a little bit of everything. Matt Canada's Warren Sharp had a really good, data reveal. Yes, even though it wasn't like he wasn't saying anything that people didn't already know. He just quantified it with actual numbers. And it was pretty much that the Steelers are tipping their hand. When they're under center, they're going to run the ball. When they're in shotgun, they're going to throw it. So there's a little bit of the tipping of the hand there. So the defense, when they see the Steelers are under center, they pretty much know that probably 4 times out of 5, they're going to be running the ball. So there's like some, and when we're talking about play calling and schematics and concepts and things like that, there's where you could complain a little bit, but the offensive line is still blocking not good. They have not been good. I have a full breakdown, Trevor, if you want to go read it on DK Pittsburgh Sports. Our content's free, so you can read it for free. It's all on there. The offensive line has not been good so far. They're not blocking well. Mason Cole's film the first 2 games has not been good. Isaac Samuel has been a disappointment so far. I'm not saying that it's bad and it's going to be bad for the next 15 games. It's just so far it's not been good.
No. In case your phone's vibrating, that is the injury report coming through on your alerts. Remember, on DKPittsburghSports.com, should you have the app downloaded, you could sign up for alerts. So anytime that injury report drops, anytime Darnell Washington tells me in the locker room that he's playing, anytime some news breaks around the Steelers, it's going right to your phone as soon as we can. So app notifications are a huge thing. We're pushing those out more now than ever. Let me bring up my point about the run game and the offensive line. William
has a good one. So definitely bring me your perspective. But William has a good thing here.
So the run game has not performed well, and that's an obvious thing. It's an obvious crutch at this point to what the Steelers are able to do. It is very much limiting what options the Steelers have available. Now, it's one thing that Matt Canada is calling these wackadoodle plays. It's one thing that Kenny Pickett is struggling to throw the football, but it's another thing that the Pittsburgh Steelers, mind you, are struggling to run the football. This is the identity of the football program, not just what they want to do. This is their true identity. And Kenny Pickett said it Wednesday. There's no identity right now. I say if the Steelers can find ways to effectively establish the run, and I don't care who touches it, I don't care who runs it, I don't care who scores the touchdowns. If it's Najee Harris, if it's Jaylen Warren, if it's Kenny Pickett, if it's Quadri Olison, I don't care who it is. Somebody has to find a way to break through this line. And yes, this line does have to block better. And what you're going to read later on DKPittsburghSports.com is how I think Darnell Washington can be a major key to helping this run blocking scheme come through. We've already seen him perform really well in these first 2 weeks, including a show-stopping pancake of Nick Bosa. So, yes, they do need to hold the line, as Jerry says. Chris, you wanted to bring up what William asked, and he says, got to have the run game for play action to work. And against a team like the Raiders, that is going to open up the options for the play action to work. But, Chris, you sound a little bit iffy on that topic.
It's okay. So it's not that, yes, the run game does help set up, does make play action more effective. However, there is a way for the Steelers to utilize play action without having to establish the run. And right away. And it's using the point of teams know, based on the data from not only from this year, but from last year, that when the Steelers are under center, they're running 4 times out of 5. Mm-hmm. So how about you line up under center and do play action on the very first play of the game? Mm-hmm. Seriously, especially with all this talk about the Steelers needing to run the ball, run the ball, establish the running game, line up under center, show everybody, try to tip your hand that, hey, we're going to impose our will. We're going to run the ball and run a play action. See what happens with the linebackers. Watch Robert Spillane try to go downhill, because we know he's also a really good run stopper. Mm-hmm. Utilize that's something that the Steelers can actually use to their advantage. And if that's the long con for Matt Canada, I'm going to make sure that teams know what we're doing, and then all of a sudden we're going to start mixing it up. And I'm thinking I might be giving him a little bit too much credit there, but all right. So play action doesn't always have to be, you don't always have to have a run game in order for play action to work, based on especially precedent.
Right. Mr. Nick of Time asks, what's your guys' opinion on why the offensive line isn't clicking? Is it bad calls or scheme or what? And Isaac was supposed to be an upgrade. Isaac still is an upgrade, I feel, over Kevin Dotson, excuse me.
Yep.
And look, there's some to the scheme. There's some to just no rhythm coming on offense. And to be honest with you, there's some coming to the telegraphing that the Steelers are doing when it comes to running the football. Mm-hmm. If you read my piece yesterday on Matt Canada, you probably saw an insert video in there of Warren Sharp over at Sharp Football. Really good analytic breakdowns of football that he does. And basically what he found was that when the Steelers are lining up to run, they are going to tell you that they are running. They are telegraphing running plays. They are saying, if we put this guy in motion, we're running the football. If Kenny Pickett is under center, we're running the football. If Kenny Pickett is in shotgun, we're throwing the football. So there are some schematic tells that the Steelers have right now. And this is just analytic breakdown by this point. This isn't even and teams will find this thing out in moment. This is things that tape study will reveal and will expose. So there is a bit to that. There's also some technical things that need cleaned up. I remember seeing a play where James Daniels on a running play took a step back with his right foot. And, who drives backwards in a running play unless it's, a zone scheme or he's supposed to pull or whatever it is. There are some technical issues that the offensive line has to clean up. And for all that we want to put on Matt Canada and Kenny Pickett, it really is a total effort right now as far as struggles are concerned with how the Steelers are unable to establish any kind of effective rhythm and any kind of effect in the run game that will lead to more success for Pickett and his receivers.
Yeah. This matchup with the Raiders is a bit interesting because, the Bills ran all over them. And obviously I pointed out that they mainly did it using man and gap schemes. And so maybe the Steelers see that, we'll see that on film and be like, okay, well, maybe instead of running zone 65% of the time, maybe we'll run almost 50-50, or maybe we'll include a little bit more, gap scheme runs, in the game plan. But this is also a Raiders team that, can be exploited through the air. Their secondary line, their second level linebackers, off-ball linebackers are not necessarily. We all know what Robert Spillane can't do in pass coverage.
Yeah.
You want to talk about trying to attack the middle of the field. This is probably the best week to do it. I do like their cornerbacks. I do think Mike Tomlin had a lot of praise for Nate Hobbs, their nickelback, and how he can, he can disrupt things both, in run defense and in coverage and as a blitzer. So there are different ways to do it. And I do think that the Steelers need to, obviously they need to run the ball, but this is a good test for the Steelers to try to do, to really try to mix things up and do a bunch of different things. Max Crosby's a really good edge rusher, no doubt. I mean, he's probably, maybe not quite on the same tier as obviously TJ Watt and Nick Bosa and Myles Garrett and those guys, but he's right there in that second tier of edge rushers in the league. But they don't have their normal starter. His name's escaping me. Their normal starter on the other side.
Wilson.
The rookie.
So.
No. Tyree Wilson is in there right now.
Sure. He's also on their injury report, which we have to talk about. Right. Who's in and out for the Raiders? But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm just saying like that's something the Browns have two good edge rushers, right? The 49ers, aren't necessarily as strong on the other edge, but they're really, really strong up front. The Raiders are they're definitely definitely the weakest front. And so you could do you could do a couple of different things. You could try to jam the ball down their throat, or you could try to run some play action and try to attack the middle of the field. Which Chandler Jones, thank you.
Chandler Jones.
I thought it was Chandler something.
How could I forget Syracuse's own baby?
He went off on social media about about the team, criticizing the team, the front office, everything like that, and he hasn't been back since. So.
By the way, on Thursday, this is Thursday's injury report for the Raiders. They haven't dropped one yet, quite yet today. This is just affecting the run game, essentially. Bilal Nichols, the DT, limited yesterday with a hamstring and hand injuries. And then Tyree Wilson did not practice with an illness on Thursday or Wednesday. So there are some concerns for the Raiders with their personnel. Now, I want to bring up this point from Damon. Damon asked, what do you guys think about being in 12 personnel with 88 and 80 and create matchup problems with the two tight ends? Now,
had a lot of questions about that.
Now, some of this is going to go in my story later, but without spoiling too much, okay? The Steelers have played 117 offensive snaps in 2 games.
Yeah.
When you break that down for the tight ends, Darnell Washington has been on the field for 50 of them, so less than half.
Yeah.
And Pat Freiermuth has been on the field for 73, so right at about half. Now, the tell is kind of coming with who is on the field, because once Darnell Washington is on the field, it's a 50-50. It's not really 50-50, I should say. It is 23 run blocking snaps, 23 receiving snaps, and 4 pass blocking snaps. So when Darnell Washington's on the field, he's half of the time going on a route or half of the time staying to run block. Yeah. Pat Freiermuth has gone out for 55 receiving snaps, 15 run blocking, and 3 pass blocking. So when Pat Freiermuth's on the field, you're thinking he's going out for a route. So do you start to use those 2 tight ends in cohesion, meaning they're both going to stay home and block, they're both going to run routes, or you're only going to have 11 personnel, meaning one of those 2 guys is on the field? I think the use of the tight ends, and there's a lot to be said about Freiermuth's lack of a usage right now in the receiving game and him getting more targets and everything, and that can be one thing that can happen this weekend against the Raiders. But I think that there's some tells that the Steelers are applying here on offense where
there's a lot of tells.
Darnell Washington's on the field, oh no, they're going to run it. And Pat Freiermuth's on the field, they're going to pass it. Now, I haven't seen a breakdown. I could look it up while you give your point to this, Chris. How much Freiermuth is playing inline versus in the slot versus wide, because that split as well is going to mean something too. But yeah, I think there's something to the Steelers potentially going with more 12 and then mixing it up. What if Darnell runs a route and Freiermuth stays home to block? Freiermuth has been pretty effective as a run blocker and a pass blocker so far.
Yeah. And see here, and I mean, Damon brings up the point, and this is again, the Steelers just needing to be a little bit less predictable. He's like, you can run and pass out of that set. And really, it really does depend on it almost doesn't matter the formation. You could have 12 personnel, you could have 22 personnel, you could have 21. I mean, you could name any formation, any personnel set. You have to be able to mix it up a little bit more. It can't be so predictable, and I think. I don't know. I mean, I feel like I'm just repeating myself.
This brings up what
Teresa
says.
Yeah.
This brings up what Teresa says. Why aren't they throwing to Washington if he's not blocking on half of the snaps? Now, he can go out for routes. That doesn't mean he's going to be the primary option. I think Darnell, his best usage is going to be in a goal line set. You saw it in the preseason against Buffalo when he drew 2 defensive pass interferences in the same goal-to-go situation. It gave the Steelers 2 first downs, which eventually led to a touchdown. Like, there are ways to utilize Darnell Washington in the passing game effectively. And yes, he is a matchup nightmare because of his size, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's never going to be, how should I say, uncovered. That doesn't necessarily mean he's always open. That doesn't necessarily mean that teams aren't looking for him. Yeah. So until Matt Canada can find a way to draw something up to get Washington open, just like he's able to with Freiermuth, then you're not going to see Darnell get as many targets as maybe you perceive, despite the amount of routes that he's actually running.
Yeah. Jake Shoot Stuff says, I saw some of all 22 of Pat's blocking. Yeah, it's not all been pretty. The Browns,
he's been good in pass blocking.
The Browns game was Austin saying great breakdown. I appreciate it. If you haven't read yet, go read it on DK Pittsburgh Sports. Yeah. The Browns game was not a good game for a lot of guys up front, and that actually included the tight ends. Darnell Washington was not good in blocking against the Browns. There was one run in particular that I highlighted in my most recent breakdown where he got pushed back 5-6 yards into the backfield. By the time Najee Harris got the handoff, Darnell Washington's number 80 was right in his face. You can't have that happen. Pat Freiermuth tried to do this chop block on try to cut down the edge, on a play that was going the opposite way. I mean, he wasn't blocking on the play side, but you're still supposed to seal off the edge on the weak side of the play. And he just flat out whiffed. It just looked like he fell, there was a sniper in the stands. So it's not all been pretty. It hasn't. And that again goes to, it's not all Matt Canada. There has been some serious lack of execution. We've seen Kenny miss a lot of throws. We've now highlighted that the offensive line has not been good. Really, I think the skill positions, both running backs and receivers, have actually been pretty decent, pretty good. I've seen some routes of Pickens that have been, okay, maybe you could have ran that a little bit better, but he got open so much against Cleveland. It's hard to complain. So yeah, I don't know.
So here's the thing with Darnell Washington, and Rick brings up, before we get to our predictions for this weekend, that guy angled it on Washington starting with inside leverage. Pass rushers are going to do that against him. And I don't think that Washington is necessarily fully capable yet, just from a technical standpoint, because let's face it, at Georgia, Darnell Washington's just blocking guys that are smaller than him. And let's go to Jake here. It goes back to scheme. Why are you asking tight ends to solo block Zadarius Smith and Myles Garrett? Now, if you look closely at the 49ers game, Darnell Washington was more of a help to Dan Moore and Chuks Okorafor, meaning he was over on that left side helping Dan Moore block Nick Bosa. This wasn't he had the pancake on Bosa, but he's not winning one-on-ones against Nick Bosa. That's just not going to happen. And Teresa, who asked the question about drawing things up for 12 personnel, followed up by asking about if guys aren't necessarily covering Washington, then why not get him the ball? I don't know if it's necessarily that to an extent, but I will say that Kenny Pickett's not getting enough time to go through all of those reads to get to Washington. Yeah. So maybe he is open. Maybe there are some plays where Kenny could get him the ball, but he's not necessarily there. All right, Chris, we have about 7 minutes left.
Yep.
Those that are listening in live on YouTube, of course, as always on a Football Friday, at the end of the show, drop your picks in the chat. We'll pop them on the screen. Let's give some thoughts for Sunday's game.
Pick
time. Chris, I will start.
Yes,
and
go ahead.
I'm 1-1, by the way. I picked the Browns to win last week. After what I saw week 1, I didn't know how I could pick the Steelers. I just forgot to account for the fact that TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith would bail me out. So week 3, I am 1-1, and I am picking the Steelers to win this football game, but I'm not expecting a high scoring affair out in Las Vegas. I am expecting like a 13-10 game with the Steelers victory. And yes, I know that might have to include a scoring drive that results in a touchdown. I think this is a touchdown and 2 Chris Boswell field goals right here. 13-10 Steelers. Let me get the touchdown. If I'm going to put who I think is the touchdown scorer, let's go a little bit into left field. Let's go with like let's see. I'm going to go like an Allen Robinson 20-yard on a post and just let me see Kenny let it fly to A-Rob downfield. Give me 13-10 Steelers, and they hold Josh Jacobs to under 75 yards rushing.
If they hold Josh Jacobs under 75 yards rushing, they better win this game.
Sure.
I'll put it that way. Yeah, I obviously not very encouraged by the Steelers' first 2 games. Overall, I mean, obviously the defense was spectacular against the Browns. There were obviously some serious flaws. You can't allow another really, really long run for a touchdown. You have to, not blow your containment on the edge if you're Levi Wallace. There's a lot of things to still, clean up on the defensive side. But when you have a healthy TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith is flying around the way he is whenever he doesn't have, arguably the best left tackle in the game, blocking him. This is an opportunity for the Steelers to, again, wreak havoc in the backfield with Jimmy Garoppolo. This is an opportunity for that defensive front to probably play the weakest offensive line they've played so far. Not saying that the Raiders have a bad offensive line. I don't think they have a bad one, but it's definitely a better opportunity for this team to try to wreak some havoc, to get in the backfield a little bit more often. And then on the offensive side, I do think I'm not holding my breath on this, but I do think there will be a more concerted effort to try to establish the run. That doesn't mean that they need to do run, pass. It doesn't mean that they need to do that, but it does mean that they maybe try to just impose their will a little bit more. And I don't know. I'm not sold yet, obviously, on the offense, but I am going to say that the Steelers are going to win this, and the final score will be 20-16. I think the defense, holds them to a touchdown and 3 field goals, and then I think the offense finally actually puts up 20 points of their own, even though maybe 3 or even 7 points might come from a takeaway that gives them a really short field. So I'm going to say 20-16 Steelers.
This is a good question from Lifted to end the show on. Lifted One's asked, does the defense or offense win this game for us? And to be honest with you, I think until further notice, the defense is going to have to win football games for the Steelers. Until further notice. Until we see signs from that offense.
And honestly, I mean, here's another thing to take into account. The Raiders have 2 All-Pros, a kicker and punter. So there will be the Raiders, have not, like I said, I have the Raiders kicking 3 field goals. If they're in range, you would expect Carlson to make his attempts. They also have a really good punter, and so if the Raiders have a short field, you expect the offense to have to drive down the field and go long. I will say though, I really liked Presley Harving's punting on Monday night. How many did he pin inside the 20?
He had a really good game punting that football.
He really did. And so maybe, giving him, maybe that gives him a boost of confidence. Maybe if the Steelers have some shorter, give the Raiders some shorter fields or give the Raiders some longer fields to have to go down, they get further down. And even if they don't get a field goal out of it, they can pin them deep and try to get the ball back. I don't know. I do think the Steelers end up coming out on top. There's nothing about the Raiders that really genuinely scares me other than Max Crosby. And I think, with the way that Devontae Adams is obviously really scary too. But I'm more talking about what the offense can do. The Steelers survived Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs last year. I think that they could do it again this year, and that's even with TJ Watt kind of still being not almost all the way there yet.
Now that being said, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk did relatively well against the Steelers. Brandon Ayuk obviously had a really big game week 1. Week 2, Amari Cooper had 90 yards. So it's not like the Steelers secondary is all the way there either.
No.
And there's no doubt that the Raiders are going to draw Devontae Adams some matchups. And Levi Wallace ran a track meet last week against Amari Cooper. Patrick Peterson hasn't looked amazing in his first few games, and there's still more snaps to come for Joey Porter Jr. So we're going to find out all of those answers on Sunday night. DK and Ramon are coming up in about 30 minutes here on DK Pittsburgh Sports for the Ramon Foster Show. DK will be in Vegas. I will be recovering from a Pitt football game. And Chris will be hanging out in Texas. So
yeah, I'll be. And now I need to address this. Bob says the ghost of Al Davis doesn't scare you. Listen, if they were playing in the Coliseum, I'd be picking the Raiders to win.
The haircut of Mark Davis terrifies me. We're out on a Football Friday. He's Chris. I'm Corey. This has been the Southside Beat. We'll talk to you Monday, everyone. Cheers.